I, on behalf of Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts, welcome you all to today's Exporters Clinic series, wherein the topic of the day is simplifying international trade financing. As you all know, factoring is one of the important financial tools which the exporters can use to their benefit and enhance their liquidity. Today's session discusses practical strategies to streamline trade finance processes, improve access to financing for exporters, and leverage smart financial solutions. The discussion will aim to demystify export financing and related solutions by explaining how they work, typical advance rates, risk coverage costs, and suitability for different export markets and order sizes. The guest speaker of the day is Mr. Manasvi Goyal. He is International Head of Sales and Growth at Credlix. Mr. Goyal has been at the forefront of helping exporters scale faster through non-recourse factoring, risk-smart financing structures, and global buyer assessments. He brings sharp, actionable insights that exporters can implement immediately to strengthen their international trade performance. So, without further ado, I would request Mr. Goyal to make his presentation, and I would request all the participants who have joined in to carefully listen to what is being said, and then probably once he's done with his presentation, we can have a question answer session. Mr. Goyal.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope the screen is visible.
Yeah, you can see it.
Thank you. So let me first of all thank EPCH and Rajesh ji for inviting me to this clinic. I think these kind of platforms are very crucial for promoting exporters and giving them knowledge on some of the things which are happening with the evaluation with the new age trade financing across the globe. So today we will be talking more about factoring and how it is useful for our Indian exporters. Before I jump into that, I will take 2 minutes to talk about the company Credlix, which I represent. Credlix is India's biggest factoring company. We are part of Moglix Group. Late Mr. Ratan Tata was the first angel investor, and then we have other stalwarts of Indian business community coming on board. Even from institutional perspective, we have Excel, Tiger Global, World Bank as our investors. We are present in 5 countries: India, UAE, US, Mexico, and within India, we work with more than 1,000 plus exporters in helping them take factoring and some of the other global financing solutions for expanding their cross-border trade. As Credlix, today we are the only private company that can help an Indian exporter gain access to 360-degree supply chain financing or trade financing to expand their business. Uh, we have our entity registered in Gift City, and through our entity in India, we can help them from raw material purchase to export factory so that the entire supply chain cycle they can focus on their growth, they can focus on core solution of manufacturing and exporting rather than worrying about some of the auxiliary things like financing. So let me start with some of the macro trends that are helping Indian exporters. The first and the biggest uh, I would say, element of growth is reduce of the USD SOFR rate. SOFR is the benchmark rate which is used by US banks. And during COVID, it was one of the lowest. And then in 2 years, it was hiked to a very high number, highest in 30 years. That sort of curtailed the demand in some of the export countries. Now, from this year onwards, we are seeing USD SOFR reduce. In fact, it has reduced by more than 1.25%. That enables growth and higher spending in countries like US and Europe. Then we look at the second element is resolved inventory issues. So during COVID, as we all know, there was a lot of demand, sort of a big cycle there. And post COVID, because of higher inventory, that demand subsidized. Now, with again clearing of the backlogs, uh, post COVID economies opening up, we are seeing some of that backlog, some of that inventory, uh, going back to pre-COVID levels, which is now boosting the demand again in some of those buyers and some of those countries. And third, with Make in India and with government's focus on new policy initiatives, new ways to enable exporters, this is enabling all of us as an ecosystem to be part of the global trade and be more competitive as we go from. So these are some of the three things that we see are elements of growth that we are seeing in today's era. On the other hand, there are, of course, counter to these, there are risks which are sort of hindering growth for us as an ecosystem. The first and the foremost is trade barrier.
Mr. Goel,
हाँ
there
राजेश
is
जी.
lot of disturbance at your end. आपके यहाँ बहुत disturbance हो रहा है background में.
Okay, let me find a place where there is less disturbance. Give me 1 second. Is this better, Rajesh ji?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back to risks of growth, I think the first and the foremost is trade barriers, where we are seeing a lot of tariffs being impacting our exports, and of course, US tariff under the Trump administration. Then second is geopolitical risks. We are seeing different countries, different nations getting into conflicts, disrupting the supply chain and the regular trade routes, and the federal budget cuts in US, which is sort of impacting the spend and curtailing the spending, particularly for discretionary goods. While keeping all of these elements in mind, today we would like to focus on two major aspects, which is from a financial perspective very, very crucial for every exporter. The first one is the buyer risk of payment or the health of the buyer. And I would further break it down into three separate buckets where there are risks on existing buyers, new buyers that we are trying to add, and the payment behavior of either of these buyers. And the second element that I will cover after this would be the cash flow or the financing gap that every exporter sees in their day to day supply chain or in their day to day business. So, from the first one, where we are talking about existing buyers. So many times we have seen exporters, they engage with the buyer, and over the years, just basis on the trust and good payment track record, they continue extending credit. But we all know that there are cycles in the economy, there are different policy changes, different changes in countries outside India, which we may not be aware of, and that might constrain an existing buyer's credibility in making timely payments to us. And because we are working with the same buyer again and again, we do not realize whether that buyer, because of those changes in the country, is getting into a financial constraint or might get into that constraint in future. And we just rely on their past track record and continue extending credit, which then in certain cases, when buyer goes for bankruptcy or buyer goes into liquidation, it comes as a shock. And if we have already built up a lot of inventory for that buyer, or if we have shipped a lot of goods to the buyer, it impacts our ability to get that payment against those specified goods. So this is a very critical piece of information. We have seen large retailers in US like Joanne and Bed Bath and Beyond getting into that phase where they were really good companies paying everyone on time. And while the conditions in US and their financial profile was not good, many of the exporters around the globe continue to supply them on credit. And when they went into bankruptcy, all those payments, all that inventory had to be liquidated, but exporters did not get their payment on time. And in many cases, we have seen a certain amount of money also exporters did not receive at all. So that is one piece of risk when we look at international buyers. The second piece of risk for buyers is when we are adding new buyers to our business. When we add a new buyer, is that buyer credit worthy? Is that buyer has the capability to pay us back after we have shipped goods to them after 60 or 90 days? In certain cases, we have seen new buyers, which are small companies in their own countries, ask for 120-day credit from an Indian company or from an Indian exporter. And we, without having that much information at our hand, we go by either the reference check or just the initial conversation and extend that credit with that hope that we will get that money back. And in many cases, whether it is a new buyer or existing buyers, we have seen even though buyers are not getting into any kind of financial stress, but their payment pattern is inconsistent. If they have promised 60 days, they don't pay on 60 days. They extend it to 75, 90 days, sometimes beyond that as well. And there is no particular reason. They find different ways to escape it and continue doing this practice. So these are the three type of risks that we typically see from a payment perspective for an Indian exporter. For some of these risks, people rely on ECGC insurance, but again, that also has its own challenges, which most of you might be working with. The second broader piece, which we are talking about, is the cash flow gap, which is basically from the day you start making the material to the day when payment from the buyer will actually come into your account. That is a very long period. On this slide, it's just a simple representation where we are talking about the point where day zero is goods have arrived in your factory, raw material has arrived, and then you are starting the manufacturing of the product. On day 60th, which is 60 days of manufacturing, you are now ready to ship the goods. And then on 60th day, when you have shipped the goods, and it takes another 60 days to reach the buyer's port, on 120th day, buyer is making the payment to you. Overall, as you would see, it's just a representation, but It reflects a 120-day cycle where over the course of these 120 days, there is a significant period where you have to invest your own money, you have to invest your cash to make the goods and ship it for the buyer. Now, there are certain ways where you can reduce this by one, taking some credit from your own supplier. So that is highlighted in the green period as a payable period. So your supplier is giving you credit for certain days. But beyond that, there is nothing else really that can help you reduce this cash gap. While there are other factors which can adversely impact this and increase the cash gap. So from a supplier perspective, it could be that the raw material is itself imported and you have to import that from outside India. So that itself will increase your payable, reduce your payable period and increase your cash gap. In certain cases, your supplier is asking for advance because he needs money. So that also adversely impact your capability to invest that cash. On the shipment side, when you have shipped the goods or when the goods have left your factory, there could be issues like delay in the vessel. Shipment was planned for a certain day, but it did not arrive on time. You did not get the container to ship the goods. There were certain custom clearance issues. Or in many cases, we have seen buyers also requesting extended payable days even after the agreed amount is set as 60 or 90 days. So all these factors can increase your cash gap, which means that more and more funds are stuck during the manufacturing process, impacting your ability to export and to grow. So to solve both of these challenges, which is buyer risk as well as cash gaps, there is this product which is called factoring. In particularly, it is called export factoring, and it is alternate to traditional finance, which typically all of us rely on while going to banks or other financial institutions domestically. And we call it as a superior alternative to traditional finance. And why do we call it? I will tell you from these four basic things that will tell you that how it can help you release your cash gap and reduce your risk. So factoring is a product that combines funds as well as insurance. So in one go, you are getting the benefits of insurance coverage, which is similar to what you get from ECGC, and also the funds, which is release of the cash gap, which is stuck due to either the shipment or because of the risks or because of the payment that you need to make to the supplier. And how does it work as compared to the total debt? So traditional debt, as you would have experienced, some of you might be exporting and you would have spoken to banks or financial institutions. Traditional banks will ask for your balance sheet, for your financials. They will come at your factory and look at your capability to produce goods and export. But suppose you are a small MSME, maybe doing, let's say, a 40-50 crore of turnover, but supplying to a very big company like TJX. Now TJX has a very good ability. They have all the banks across the globe would be ready to give funds to TJX. But when TJX comes to you and say that, sir, you are giving me 1 million of goods every month, I want you to double it. I want you to do 2 million now because I like your execution, I like the quality of products and other associated things with it. Now, that additional fund requirement, when you go to a bank, they will look at you standalone. They will not look at that you are making that goods for a large company like TJX. But in factoring, factoring is looked at from a buyer's perspective. So, as a factoring company, we will look at who is the buyer that is giving you the order and who is the buyer to whom you are supplying the goods. So that is the point number one, which talks about based on buyer's credibility. So it does not look at the size of your company or your scale. It looks at the buyer's scale. Secondly, it is in forex. It is not in INR. So today, when you export goods, you export to TJX in US or in Euro, depending on the country that they are in. Similarly, factoring happens in the currency of the invoice. So whenever you receive funds, you receive in the currency of the invoice. So as a regular day-to-day working, once you will receive funds from the buyer, you will need to pay conversion charges. But when you receive that during factoring, you don't need to pay any conversion charges in addition to that one-time conversion. While you might take similar traditional banking will give you in INR, that might require you to convert again when you export from India. But with factoring, because it is underlying the same currency as the invoice, there are no further conversion charges. And it also reduces the risk on fluctuations. Third, and the biggest element is that it is off balance sheet. What it means is that whatever money or whatever funds a factoring company has given to you, it does not come as a loan or as a debt to your balance sheet. So today, whatever is your current debt profile or whatever is your current arrangement with your bank in India, factoring does not disturb that. Factoring does not create any issue with your existing bank because it is an off balance sheet product. And since it is based on buyer's credibility, you also do not need to provide any kind of collateral for taking factoring. It is like having an access to a credit card where you can swipe whenever you want and it will not be considered as a loan for your business. And fourth and foremost thing, it is 100% digital and paperless, which means that once a factoring company sets up, evaluates the trade, sets up the limit on the buyer, all you need to do is just upload a copy of the documents on their web portal or on their app and get those funds directly into your AD bank account. So with these four things, factoring as a product is much superior to the traditional finance that you will be getting from banks or any other domestic institution. So here I would like to highlight one use case where uh, there is a customer of ours who has been working with us for last 4 years and he is using factoring with us. And similarly, we have plotted another customer who is not using factoring from us or from any other company, but just relying on traditional banking for their growth. And over the course of 4 years, we have realized that the customer who was availing factoring from us has grown 50% more than a customer who just relied on traditional finance. And again, traditional finance, they have their own limitation of looking at collateral and securities, while factoring is a completely off balance sheet product. So with this tool, if you are able to adopt early, your ability to grow your business increases significantly. I mean, this customer was able to grow 50% more over the course of 4 years. There are customers who are able to do it early on as well. And since it is a digital and fast process, it is very quick and easy to adopt. There are, of course, like every other product, there are typically, I would say, two types of factoring which are prominent in India. There are other, of course, other types, but typically two types are prominent. One is non-recourse, and second is recourse factoring. As per RBI guidelines and from our experience, non-recourse factoring is something that is, you know, one, acceptable to Indian banks, and two, that helps you scale more. With recourse factoring or recourse factoring is still a bit more conservative, but non-recourse factoring is something which is highly, applicable. And as an exporter, whenever you are talking to a factoring company, please ensure that you are focusing on non-recourse factoring only. And what does non-recourse and recourse means? The word recourse means that who is holding the risk in case payment of that invoice does not come to the factoring company. Recourse factoring means that the risk of payment not being paid to the factoring company by the buyer still lies with the exporter. Essentially, it means that when I talked about factoring being funds plus insurance, recourse factoring takes away the insurance part. Only the non-recourse factoring is a product where funds and insurance are both combined. So non-recourse means that factoring company will not come to the supplier in case buyer does not pay to the supplier. That's where it is a product where you are getting funds along with insurance. So please remember that it is many times we have seen, because factoring is a product which is typically done by companies outside India. There are very few companies, Indian companies, that are doing factoring. We are seeing many of the outside companies using recourse factoring as a product for exporters. And when we don't read through those clauses and those agreements, we sign up for recourse factoring, and when any adverse situation arrives, the factoring company then raises a claim on the exporter. Okay. The next step is about how does a factoring company evaluates the risk of a foreign buyer? How does it know whether the foreign buyer is actually a good buyer or not? So there are three different elements to the risk assessment of a foreign buyer. The first one is the financial analysis of the buyer and the credit bureau report of the buyer. As a factoring company, like I had mentioned earlier, we are part of a factoring consortium called FCI, which is a global group of about 400 financial companies that share information about corporates and enterprises that are involved in cross border trade. So, as a member of that, we or any other factoring company is able to get information from credit bureaus in that respective country. So, today in India, you have CIBIL, right? You go to any bank or any company, they will say that, sir, give me your CIBIL consent because I want to check with CIBIL what is your credit bureau score. Similarly, there are these credit bureaus in different countries, and they have information about the buyer's financial strength and financial capabilities. So, that is the first element of risk assessment. The second element is customs data analysis or shipment data analysis. So, as a factoring company, we have access to the customs data of multiple countries. We look at when there is a buyer, what is their volume and frequency of purchase from different countries. Because of our partnership with credit bureaus, we are also able to understand what are the payment trends against these individual shipments. So these two combined give a very good information about the day-to-day operations and day-to-day functioning of that buyer. The third important element, which we typically ignore when we talk to other companies, but factoring company keeps that in mind, is the country risk analysis. Maybe the buyer is very good, but at a country level, country does not have the forex reserves, or country does not have the regular laws of enforcing factoring. So there, we had this example where we were doing factoring for an Indian pharma company that was supplying to African nation. And after 60 days, the payment did not come. We went to our supplier and we asked that why is the payment not coming? And then we went to the buyer. He did not have an answer. Then we went to the buyer. We asked them that why are you not making the payment? Buyer said that I have money in my bank, but my bank does not have forex reserves to pay that money out. So they are not prioritizing my payment versus other large payments that that bank has to make. So that is another element of country risk analysis, which we have to keep in mind when we are diversifying away from some of the large markets like US and Europe. So as Credlix, what we have done is we have put some of this intelligence on our website in a tool called Buyer Credit Worthiness Check. What it does is it uses all these different elements, it uses all this data that we rely on and give you a preliminary indication of buyer's assessment or buyer's health. And it is free for everyone to use. You can go to the website and look at it, try it out. This will give you an indication of whether that buyer is from a starting point itself. Is it good for you to have a conversation, or do you need more information to take this kind of risk on the buyer? As Credlix, as I mentioned, we are one of the largest factoring companies, and proud to say we are one of the largest Indian companies that are helping countries, exporters avail factoring and explain this to them. These are some of, so we partner regularly with EPCH in helping, in helping these kind of messages to the EPCH community. Very recently, we did an event in Mexico with the Indian Embassy, where we connected Indian exporters to Mexican buyers, and all of those buyers were vetted through Indian Embassy and through our credit bureau checks, so that wherever an Indian exporter is taking part or talking to a buyer, they are already vetted through a financial process. So that's a bit about factoring and about Credlix. Rajesh ji, I will take a pause here, and maybe we can take few questions from the attendees.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very thought-provoking, and it gives us an additional financial tool to look at, which is also very safe. The best part about is when you have a buyer's repository and the service takers have the recourse, have the access to that repository. They can check the buyer's credibility. So with that, if we have participant joined in, if anyone has any question, you can probably raise your hand. Anyone? Because Government of India too is thinking very positively about the factoring services. आप में से किसी का क्वेश्चन आपसे देखो क्वेश्चन कोई भी चीज अगर आप पूछना चाहें कोई भी आपके दिमाग में आ रहा हो या फ्री टू आस्क द क्वेश्चन दैट्स ऑल चैलेंज कोई भी चीज क्योंकि आप पहली बार सुन रहे हैं तो इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चन यू कैन शूट
तो फाइनेंस से रिलेटेड
पूछो
जी सर, ये एक्सपोर्ट फैक्टरिंग जो आपने बताया था ट्रेडिशनल फाइनेंस से ऑल्टरनेटिव है,
बोलो
तो इसमें ये जो फॉरेक्स है इसमें भी तो हमारा रिस्क रहता है, अगर डिपेंड ऑन द मार्केट, अगर उस टाइम पे हम फॉरेक्स में अगर एक्सचेंज में कर रहे हैं तो उसमें भी तो हमारा थोड़ा बहुत रिस्क रहता ही है.
देखिए, अगर आप आई वुड से दैट्स अ वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन, एंड मैं इसको आंसर करने का ट्राई करता हूँ. जैसे आज अगर आप कोई भी गुड्स प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं और एंड देन यू हैव ऑलरेडी agreed on a price with a foreign buyer that at this price I will sell you the goods. Now उस प्राइस के एग्रीमेंट से लेके जब आप गुड्स उसके पास तक पहुंच रहे हैं, दैट टोटल ड्यूरेशन इज 150 डेज. उस 150 डेज में currency fluctuation between, let's say, dollar or euro with INR can happen multiple times. With factoring, what happens is that that time period reduces. That time period, instead of 150 days, जैसे ही आप गुड शिप कर दोगे उस टाइम पे आपको फॉरेन फंड्स मिल जाते हैं. तो 150 डेज से ये आपका 90 डेज टू 120 डेज साइकिल रिड्यूस कर देता है. तो वो आपका 60 टू 90 डेज का साइकिल बच के रह जाता है फ्रॉम 150 डेज. एंड 60 टू 90 डेज के ऊपर अगर आप किसी भी बैंकिंग या किसी भी फैक्टरिंग कंपनी से बात करोगे, उनको सर्टेनिटी ऑफ फ्लक्चुएशन बिटवीन करेंसीज ज्यादा होती है. मतलब आज अगर हम लोग INR टू USD देखेंगे तो आज हम लोग नेक्स्ट 60 डेज का थोड़ा इजीली प्रेडिक्ट कर पाएंगे रादर देन नेक्स्ट 150 डेज. तो वो रिस्क रहेगा बट दैट रिस्क गेट्स मिनिमाइज्ड क्योंकि आपका टाइम फ्रेम कम हो जा रहा है. आपको आज पता है कि मेरे को 60 डेज बाद पैसा आने वाला है, तो आप उस टाइम की प्राइस अभी से ही बुक कर सकते हो. आप उस पे हेजिंग भी कर सकते हो.
इससे तो एक्चुअली जो हमारे एक्सपोर्टर है उनका वर्क बढ़ गया ना एक तरीके से. वो जहां पर अभी देख रहे थे उसकी जगह अब उनको फॉरेक्स का भी देखना पड़ेगा. अगर उनको कन्वर्जन कराना है या कुछ भी चीज करनी है तो उनको उसका भी कैलकुलेशन करना पड़ेगा. एक एडिशनल चीज ऐड हो गई इसके अंदर जो हमारे फाइनेंसेस है उसके अंदर.
तो आई वुड से कि देखिए, आप अगर फॉरेन में एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं और फॉरेन करेंसी में कर रहे हैं तो वो चीज वैसे भी करनी पड़ेगी. मतलब अगर फैक्टरिंग नहीं भी होगी तो भी आपको पेमेंट 150 डेज बाद आएगा.
जी.
अब 150 डेज पे करेंसी अप है या डाउन है, वो एक्सरसाइज तो आपको वैसे भी करनी ही पड़ेगी.
ऐसा
इट
है.
इज नॉट अबाउट फैक्टरिंग, इट इज अबाउट फॉरेन करेंसी वर्सेस INR.
आगे
इट इज ऑल अबाउट व्हेन आर यू गेटिंग द मनी.
मैंने
सी वो समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जब आपके बिल्स रिसीवेबल्स हैं, जब बाहर की पेमेंट आएगी तब आएगी. लेकिन इफ यू रिक्वायर इंस्टेंट कैश, अगर आपको अभी कैपिटल की जरूरत है, सो यू कैन गो इन फॉर फैक्टरिंग. आप बिल डिस्काउंट कर सकते हो. देयर इज स्मॉल सर्विस चार्जेस. वो कितना % सर्विस चार्जेस होता है वो भी एक्सप्लेन कर दीजिए एक बार.
श्योर राजेश जी. सो सर्विस चार्ज,
मेरे ख्याल से ना एक एग्जांपल से लेते हैं. मैं आपको एग्जांपल देता हूँ. मान लीजिए मैं एक निर्यातक हूँ. मैंने $1 लाख का सामान शिप किया US के. मेरे बिल्स रिसीवेबल्स है $1 लाख के. ठीक
हाँ
है.
जी.
और मैंने US भेज दिया सामान. आज मैं आपके पास आता हूँ कि साहब मेरे $1 लाख मेरे को 90 दिन बाद मिलेंगे
हाँ
या
जी.
180 दिन बाद मिलेंगे. ठीक है. मतलब $1 लाख में से कह लीजिए मैंने एडवांस लेके और से 50% एडवांस लिया. मेरे $50,000 आने बाकी हैं. उस $50,000 पे आप क्या चार्जेस लेंगे, इस एग्जांपल से समझाइए.
ठीक है राजेश जी. तो सबसे पहली बात है, एज अ फैक्टरिंग कंपनी जो चार्जेस हमारे होते हैं वो उसी अमाउंट पे होते हैं जितना एक्सपोर्टर ने रिक्वेस्ट किया है. वो पूरी इनवॉइस वैल्यू पे नहीं होते. तो आपने राजेश जी जैसे एग्जांपल बताया कि $100,000 के रिसीवेबल्स हैं और उसमें से बायर ने 50,000 ऑलरेडी दे दिया है. तो अगर जब मैं चार्ज डालूंगा या मैं अगर फैक्टरिंग करूंगा, क्योंकि $50,000 ऑलरेडी बायर ने दे दिया है, तो मेरे लिए देने के लिए पैसा ही $50,000 बचा है.
ठीक है.
तो दैट इज पॉइंट नंबर 1. सेकेंड, $50,000 में एज अ फैक्टरिंग और एज अ इंश्योरेंस कवरेज मैक्सिमम 90% कवर्ड होता है. सो 50,000 में से एज पर एट एनी पॉइंट इन टाइम
एक चीज और जोड़ दूं. रिकोर्स और नॉन रिकोर्स दोनों जोड़ के बताइएगा कॉस्ट को.
ठीक है राजीव जी. सो जैसे मैंने आपको बोला कि फैक्टरिंग ट्रू सेंस में नॉन रिकोर्स ही होती है. तो हम लोग रिकोर्स वाली फैक्टरिंग नहीं करते हैं. रिकोर्स
अच्छा
इज लाइक अ लोन ओनली,
ठीक है
while non-recourse factoring is with insurance. तो
ठीक
दोनों केसेस में अगर मेरा $50,000 का रिसीवेबल है तो
हाँ
मैक्सिमम कंपनीज उसका 90% पैसा दे सकती हैं, विच
ठीक
इज $45,000.
हाँ
और $45,000 क्योंकि 90 दिन बाद आने वाला है बायर
हाँ
से, सो उसका चार्ज जस्ट
हाँ
लाइक एनी एनुअलाइज्ड इंटरेस्ट रेट
हाँ
90 डेज के लिए लगेगा.
ठीक
सो अगर हम बात करें कि फैक्टरिंग कंपनी का क्या चार्ज है, हर कंपनी का अलग अलग रहता है. अगर
हाँ
मैं 10% पर एनम एवरेज लेता हूँ
हाँ
फॉर द कॉस्ट, सो
हाँ
दैट कम्स आउट टू अराउंड 0.8% पर मंथ.
नॉर्मल ठीक है
ठीक है, तो अगर
हाँ
मेरा 90 डे का रिसीवेबल है तो 3 महीने
हाँ
हो जाते हैं, तो
हाँ
टोटल कॉस्ट जो लगेगा वो 2.4% लगेगा ऑफ
ठीक है
45,000,
ठीक
which is equal to, I would say, around 900 to $1,000.
$1,000 ठीक.
So
So that is the cost.
that is the cost for $45,000.
उसमें उसमें आपके ये तो इंटरेस्ट आपने बताया, उसमें आपके सर्विस चार्जेस भी होंगे या वो इंटरेस्ट ही बस वही है, उसी में इंक्लूड है सब कुछ?
सो क्रेडिलिक्स के लिए सर वो एक ही कॉस्ट में इंक्लूडेड है, ताकि
ठीक.
एक्सपोर्टर को इजीली पता चल जाए कि उसका कितना कॉस्ट आ रहा है. कुछ
अच्छा
कंपनीज होती हैं जो उसको ब्रेक कर देती हैं,
हाँ
सो वो उनका अपना अलग पैटर्न होता है, और हम सबको यही कहते हैं कि आप इनवॉइस के अगेंस्ट आपको जितना टोटल कॉस्ट लग रहा है आप वो देखिए, आप
ठीक
इंडिविजुअल हेड्स को ना देखिए.
ठीक ठीक ठीक. अच्छा मेरे साथ विवेक अग्रवाल जी हैं, ही वांट्स टू आस्क समथिंग. हाँ
हाँ,
विवेक जी.
ठीक है राजेश जी.
विवेक जी हेलो.
हेलो.
हाँ विवेक जी पूछिए, अपना क्वेश्चन पूछिए.
हेलो.
हेलो हम सुन पा रहे हैं आपको, अपना क्वेश्चन पूछिए आप.
मैं पूछूं साहब?
हाँ आवाज आ रही है आपकी, बताएं.
ओके साहब, फैक्टरिंग में आई वुड लाइक टू अंडरस्टैंड टू थिंग्स और
हम्म
थ्री थिंग्स. एक तो ये है जी, जो कस्टमर हमारा जिसकी
हम्म
ईसीजीसी लिमिट भी मिल रही है बट वो कस्टमर की फैक्टरिंग नहीं होती है, ऐसा क्यों होता है?
ठीक है.
एंड सेकंड क्वेश्चन इज कि ऑल्दो यू से इट इज विदाउट रिकोर्स, बट इन प्रैक्टिकल दिस थिंग, अगर मेरे आपके पास में 3 कस्टमर हैं और एक ने कस्टमर ने पैसा नहीं दिया, तो बाकी 2 कस्टमर की जो फैक्टरिंग करी हुई है उसमें से आप रिकवर कर लेंगे. दैट इज द रियलिटी. सो इट इज नॉट विदाउट रिकोर्स.
ओके.
सो दीज आर माय टू ऑब्जर्वेशंस, क्वेश्चंस.
गोयल साहब.
ठीक है, थैंक्स विवेक जी. मैं दोनों का आंसर वन बाय वन करता हूँ. पहले क्वेश्चन का फर्स्ट, कि जहाँ पे ईसीजीसी कवरेज है वहां पे फैक्टरिंग लिमिट क्यों नहीं है. तो इसके काफी सारे रीजन हो सकते हैं, एंड जो सबसे बड़ा और प्राइमरी रीजन है, जैसे मैंने आपको दिखाया कि रिस्क असेसमेंट ऑफ द बायर is done by using credit score or credit bureau reports of foreign countries, and this is all done through private banks. So किसी पर्टिकुलर बायर पे अगर ईसीजीसी कवर है, लेकिन प्राइवेट बैंकिंग की उसके ऊपर सॉरी फ्रॉम क्रेडिट परस्पेक्टिव बहुत अच्छा स्कोर नहीं है, तो उस पे आपको फैक्टरिंग नहीं मिलेगी. दैट इज द प्राइमरी इशू दैट वी हैव सीन.
Sir, but
Second,
I'm sorry, but after all, you will see the buyer's history. In the last 10 years, he has never defaulted. In fact, he has paid before time. And that is why ECGC ने भी लिमिट दे रहा है. ECGC भी जो है अपनी ड्यू डिलिजेंस करके ही लिमिट देगा.
मैं वही बता रहा हूँ विवेक जी, और वही मेरे इसमें सबसे पहला पॉइंट था कि हम लोग सिर्फ पुराने ट्रैक रिकॉर्ड पे जाते हैं टिपिकली, लेकिन हमें जब हम फैक्टरिंग करते हैं तो हमें उस कंपनी की, उस इंडस्ट्री की और उस कंट्री की फ्यूचर क्या चल रहा है उस पे भी डिसीजन लेना पड़ता है. पास्ट में सब कुछ अच्छा हो सकता है, लेकिन अगर आगे उस पे स्ट्रेस आने वाला है, आगे अगर उस पे बहुत ज्यादा कंप्लायंस बर्डन आने वाला है, उसके बेसिस पे ही फैक्टरिंग लिमिट सेटअप होती है। ईसीजीसी का अपना अलग क्राइटेरिया है, ईसीजीसी का अपना अलग वे है ऑफ असेसिंग द रिस्क, फैक्टरिंग कंपनी का अपना अलग तरीका है। इसको अगर मैं आपको सिंपल एग्जांपल से बताऊं तो हम सब लोग पर्सनल इंश्योरेंस लेते हैं, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस, कभी आदित्य बिरला से, कभी LIC से। सो हर जने को हर इंश्योरेंस कंपनी से जरूरी नहीं है कि इंश्योरेंस मिल जाए, उसके बाद भी जरूरी नहीं है कि सेम लेवल ऑफ कवरेज मिल जाए। तो इसको आप एग्जैक्टली ऐसा ही समझिए कि ईसीजीसी एक कंपनी है जो इंश्योरेंस दे रही है, देयर आर मल्टीपल अदर कंपनीज अक्रॉस द ग्लोब, उनमें से किसी एक कंपनी के साथ फैक्टरिंग कंपनी काम कर रही होगी। जैसे हम वर्ल्ड की टॉप 2 कंपनीज के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, तो अगर उन लोगों के पैरामीटर्स के हिसाब से वो बायर पे उतना क्रेडिट रिस्क एप्लीकेबल नहीं है, तो हम फैक्टरिंग नहीं दे पाएंगे। So it is different from ECGC because policies are different. The way data is interpreted is different. And that is why we are, I would say, more conservative and more recent than what ECGC does. तो ये आपके पहले क्वेश्चन का आंसर हो गया। दूसरा क्वेश्चन है कि आप बोल रहे हैं कि 3 बायर हैं और 3 में से एक का पेमेंट नहीं आया, तो फैक्टरिंग कंपनी ने दूसरे के पेमेंट से उसको रिकवर कर लिया। तो अगेन आई वुड से कि आपको एक बार उनका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट गो थ्रू करना पड़ेगा, जिस भी कंपनी के साथ आपने ये किया है, बिकॉज देर आर 2 टाइप्स, लाइक आई सेड, नॉन रिकोर्स एंड रिकोर्स। एंड अगर पहले वाले बायर से पैसा नहीं आया है तो उसका क्या रीजन है। अगर आपका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट नॉन रिकोर्स है एंड बायर हैज नॉट मेड द पेमेंट बिकॉज ऑफ देयर ओन फाइनेंशियल स्ट्रेस और देयर ओन फाइनेंशियल इशू, so that factoring company cannot deduct money from payment of other buyers. ये आप उससे बात कर सकते हैं, फैक्टरिंग कंपनी से उनसे डिमांड कर सकते हैं। और अगर that payment has not come because of the quality issue of goods, then typically for a factoring company, because it is only a financing company, it is not having any say or any quality check on the goods, they will come back to the exporter to verify that quality. And majorly what we have seen across the globe as a practice, the factoring company says कि sir quality वाला discussion या quality वाला जो भी issue buyer ने raise किया है, it is between exporter and the buyer. तो उस केस में factoring company can come to you for their payment on that equivalent amount of invoice. So these are the 2 cases. अब इसमें आपका विवेक जी कौन सा केस रहा है या क्या एक्सपीरियंस रहा है?
इनमें से कोई भी केस नहीं है साहब, ना ही तो क्वालिटी क्लेम है और वो विदाउट रिकोर्स बायर का था। For whatever reasons that payment got lost somewhere in the system, the buyer is so large, the system में कहीं गुम गई, वो नहीं मिली उनको in spite of various traces.
ठीक है विवेक जी, मतलब इस पे आई कैन डिस्कस विथ यू ऑफलाइन एंड सी कि हम कैसे आपकी मदद कर सकते हैं, बट आई थिंक कभी कभी मतलब टिपिकली इट इज अ वेरी स्टैंडर्ड स्विफ्ट मैकेनिज्म जहां से पेमेंट आता है, तो very
No,
less
I
chances
understand.
of
I understand. It's a very
getting
common thing. It's a very common thing. We keep doing it. We've been exporting for the last 50 years, but you have all these banking issues once in a while.
Vivek, what you can do is you can discuss this offline with Mr. Manasvi Goel.
Right.
So thank you, Ji. Thank you very much for joining us. We move on. If anyone else has any question, I think there are no more questions. So I would like to close this Exporters Clinic session. Thank you, Manasvi Ji. Thank you so very much for
Thank you,
your
Rajesh.
presentation. And we had a good discussion on the advantages of factoring and why one should avail services like factoring. So thank you once again. I thank all the participants who have joined in for today's Exporters Clinic as well. keep looking for our circulars. We'll continue with this exporters clinic series, and in next 15 days, soon we'll come back with a new topic. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.